Okay, we are now starting on the propositional logic. What we're going to be doing is translating ordinary sentences into symbolic forms. We're going to replace statements like I like pizza into just simple letters like P. And then we're going to focus on these things called operators. There's connecting operators and modifying operators. Connecting operator would be something like an and. So if I said I like pizza and I like ice cream, you'd have P for pizza, for I like pizza. You'd have an I for I like ice cream. And you put a connecting operator in between those two. In this case, the and, we're going to use a dot. I'll explain that in just a second. So once we get those statements set up and translated into its symbolic form, then we'll work on analyzing the statements and talk about what it takes to make certain statements true or certain statements false. And then we'd look at putting those statements together in arguments and figuring out what it would take to make certain arguments valid or invalid. So let's get started. We have 5 operators that we're going to work with. There's negation, the conjunct, the disjunct, the biconditional, and the conditional. The negation for the rest of the semester, just note to self, negation does whatever it wants. This often works in weird ways. The rest of these all are pretty similar. The rules applying are pretty uniform. So these have many overlapping rules for application. Just note for the future, if you ever hear me say, okay, this is the way it always works, and then I say, but negation isn't going to do that, just be prepared for that. You're going to hear that a lot with negation. Negation, I think it's often helpful if you describe as a modifying operator. And the other 5, I think it's helpful if you describe them as connecting operators. So you have a modifying operator, negation, and then you have connecting operators, the conjunct, the disjunct, the biconditional, and the conditional. The squiggly line on your computer keyboard, if you look in that top left, you'll see that squiggly line. That's a tilde, and that's what we use for negation. The conjunct, we're just going to use a big dot. So if you went P is I like pizza, I like ice cream is I like P and I is I like pizza and I like ice cream. The disjunct, we're just going to use a lowercase v. And the biconditional, based on this computer, sometimes you'll see it as I'll have like an equal sign, but then I'll use like the underline component on my keyboard. There's in Microsoft Word, there's a symbol function that sometimes, depending on what program you're working with, has the symbol triple bar, and sometimes it doesn't. So a lot of times you'll see my triple bar might look a little bit funky. It'll look like this, and then a little bit of a gap, and there's the third one, but you should be able to catch on to that eventually. And then this conditional side is a sideways horseshoe. A lot of times it'll look like when I'm doing these computer presentations, it'll look like a backwards C. It just depends on what symbol I have access to at the time. Okay, let's go ahead and practice with these. So we're going to practice the operators, and then I'm going to make a quick comment about the conditional statements. First operator we have is negation. So if we were to say something like, I don't like pizza, this is a combination of a statement, I like pizza, and then its negation. So really what we'd be doing is bumping this don't out to the front. So then you have the statement, I like pizza. And the don't goes out to the front, and so it's not the case that. Don't just reread as it is not the case that. So here, I don't like pizza. In other words, you could express it as it is not the case that I like pizza. So I like pizza would be I, and then the negation would just go in front of that I. So it is not the case that I like pizza, or in other words, I don't like pizza. Negation modifies, it doesn't connect. So you'll always see negation on the left of the letter, which stands for a statement. Or sometimes we'll deal with these separators later on, but let's say you had pizza and ice cream. So inside of these parentheses, it says, I like pizza and I like ice cream. This negation is negating this whole statement, I like pizza and I like ice cream. But negation never connects things. Okay, so the next one just gave an allusion to that with the example I just gave here, but we'll do it again. I like pizza and I like ice cream. Here, that and, we're going to give a dot. I like pizza, we're going to call P. I like ice cream, we're going to call I. And so it's just P dot I. And so it's just P dot I. If we changed that and out for an or, so let me erase that word and in the middle of the sentence and change that for an or, I like pizza or I like ice cream, then you just go P wedge I. There's I like pizza or I like ice cream. How about if you did erase the or and before the I go if I like pizza, comma, then I like ice cream. That would be P for I like pizza, and then that sideways horseshoe, and then I for ice cream. If I like pizza, then I like ice cream. And the final one, if we erase that if then, and in small print I'm going to write if and only if. So I like pizza if and only if I like ice cream. That one's going to be a P, a triple bar, and an I for ice cream. So that's I like pizza if and only if I like ice cream. Okay, we need to take a second and talk about conditional statements because they're going to pose a bit of a problem for us in translation. We need to be sure we really understand how they work. So remembering back to the early section of this class, we discussed conditional statements, and there's a few components we need to be clear on. So there is if A, then B. This A, the fancy name for that is the antecedent. This B, the fancy name for that is the consequent. Another word for antecedent is sufficient condition. For consequent, the other word for that is necessary condition. Sufficient condition means it is good enough to make the other thing happen. Necessary condition means without it, the other thing cannot happen. So sufficient condition means it's good enough to make the other thing happen. Necessary condition means without it, the other thing cannot happen. So when you say if A then B, the A is good enough to make B happen. And when you say if A then B, if B doesn't happen, A can't happen. The A is this antecedent and the B is the consequent. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. We have a little bit more to do with conditional statements now. So that pesky if. The way conditional statements are always going to be set up is you have your antecedent on the left side of your horseshoe. Your consequent will always be on the right side of your horseshoe. So be sure you're clear on that. The antecedent will always be on the left side of the horseshoe. The consequent will always be on the right side of your horseshoe. Usually if is followed by the antecedent. So whatever comes out of after if, you're going to put on the left side of your horseshoe. So for example, if I see a dog, then I see a canine. Here's another example. I see a canine if I see a dog. This first one, you have if is followed by the antecedent. So here, I see a dog is going to be your antecedent. I see a canine is going to be the other thing. That's going to be your consequent. So we're going to put our horseshoe here. The antecedent is going to be on the left side of your horseshoe. So that'll be D. And then the other thing is going to be your consequent. I see a canine if I see a dog. Here, if is followed by the antecedent. That antecedent is going to go on the left side of the horseshoe. And then your other thing is your consequent. In this case, I see a canine. So even though these two sentences are kind of opposite images of each other, I see a dog is on the left side of the top sentence, I see a dog is on the right side of the bottom sentence. Because of the location of the word if, it tells you that they're going to be translated in the exact same way into the symbolic form, because you're always putting whatever follows if into your antecedent position, and the antecedent position is going to be the left side of your horseshoe. Now we got to get into some problematic issues with the if. When you see only if, that's going to be followed by the consequent. So whereas if by itself is followed by the antecedent, only if is followed by the consequent. For example, I see a dog only if I see a canine. Here you have only if, and that tells you whatever comes after only if is going to be your consequent, and your consequent is the right side of the horseshoe. So I see a canine is your consequent, that's the right side of your horseshoe. I see a dog is the other thing in this case, and that's going to be your antecedent, and that'll be the left side of your horseshoe. So only if, just keep alert, when you see only if, you put whatever follows only if on the right side of your horseshoe. And finally, when you see if and only if, that's going to be a biconditional, and so you'll just throw a triple bar in between it. So I see a bachelor if and only if I see an unmarried man. So B for bachelor, U for unmarried man. So those are the three senses of if. You have if, you have only if, and you have if and only if. If is by far the most common one you're going to see, but just be alert that if you see the words only if, or if you see the words if and only if, those all mean different things. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Let's practice. If I like pizza, then I go to the store. So we have I like pizza in red, I go to the store in blue. First step, I'm going to throw that horseshoe after the comma there, so that I like pizza is the antecedent, because the antecedent follows the word if. So I have I like pizza, horseshoe, I go to the store. The next step, let's turn those into letters. So P, horseshoe, S. Here's another one. I buy ice cream if I have a sweet tooth. So I have a sweet tooth is going to go on the left side of the horseshoe because it follows the word if. So you have I have a sweet tooth, horseshoe, I buy ice cream. And then we're going to turn those into letters. So S, horseshoe, B. S for sweet tooth, B for buying ice cream. Next one, I buy ice cream only if I have a sweet tooth. So that one, whatever follows only if is going to be your consequent. The consequent goes on the right side of your horseshoe. So I have a sweet tooth is going to go on the right side of the horseshoe. So it's going to be I buy ice cream, horseshoe, I have a sweet tooth. And then we'll just turn those into letters. B, horseshoe, S. All right. Remember, the consequent follows only if. Next one. I like ice cream if and only if I like good food. If and only if is the triple bar. So it's going to be I like ice cream triple bar, I like good food. And then we'll go C triple bar F, C for cream for ice cream, F for food for good food. So remember, if and only if gets a triple bar. Let's talk about the main operator and the three separators. So there can be only one main operator in a statement. The main operator is the most exposed operator in the line. Except for negation, that's the one that can be exposed with another operator. When you have negation exposed with another operator, the other operator is the main operator. So negation defers to that other operator. Let me give you an example of that. So if we had P horseshoe Q and a negation in front of it, right now this negation is the most exposed operator in the line. This parenthesis set is enclosing that horseshoe. So negation is the most exposed. If you had a wedge, P wedge R, now you have this wedge is exposed and the negation is exposed. This top sentence says there can be only one main operator. The main operator is the most exposed operator in the line. Well, here you have the wedge is most exposed and the negation is most exposed. That's okay because a negation is doing its own thing. It can be exposed with another operator, but when this happens, the other operator is the main operator. And so in this case, that wedge is the main operator. Again, just remember, negation is that weird operator that does its own thing, and it's going to have its own rules. To give you an example of the other way where you see another operator in play that can't happen, now you have this wedge is exposed. This wedge is exposed as well. It's not enclosed inside these parentheses. So here you have two operators, but that violates this thing where it says there can be only one main operator. The main operator is the most exposed operator in the line. This cannot happen. You'd have to enclose one of these two operators. I'll walk you through the steps for enclosing operators in just a second. This is just a heads up of how you do it. And so now the operator, the wedge on the right side, is the only one that's fully exposed. We'll talk about how to do this right now. Okay, so we use separators to enclose operators. There's a level 1 separator, a level 2 separator, and a level 3 separator. The level 1 separator is the parenthesis, the level 2 separator is the square bracket, and the level 3 separator is the set brace. So by level 1, I mean the first time you set apart something, the first time you enclose something, you're gonna use parentheses, or these level 1s in the red. Level 2 separator, if you're enclosing something that is already enclosed. So for this example, P wedge Q is enclosed with the parenthesis. Now if you're enclosing the P wedge Q with that dot R, you already have a parenthesis doing an enclosure, so you move to the square bracket to enclose that parenthesis with something else. And now that you have the green square bracket enclosing the P wedge Q dot R, all of that stuff is enclosed. If you're going to enclose that square bracket another time, you need to shift over to the level 3 separator, which is the set brace. And so we use this set brace, which in this example is drawn out in blue, just for clarity's sake. And then off to the right, you see P horseshoe P is enclosed in the red. That's just so you get clear that, okay, that's the first time anything is enclosed here. And so that is going to use a level 1 separator. Let's look at some more examples of how this might work. So here I have P, wedge Q, wedge R, wedge S, wedge T, wedge U. All of these need to be enclosed until we have just one main operator. Let's say there's no rhyme or reason for making one of these the main operator right now. Later on, this context of the sentences we read will tell us what's going to be the main operator, but for now, I'm just going to make up the main operator. I'm also going to make up the order things are getting enclosed. Later on, the context of the sentences will tell us how to enclose things. But let's say we wanted to make this wedge here that I have the arrow underneath of the main operator. So that's going to be the 1, 2, 3, fourth wedge in out of a total of 5 separating the different letters. Okay, so the first step, let's separate out P wedge Q. And then we'll separate out R wedge S as well. It's the first time either of these are being enclosed. And then we'll separate out T wedge U. We still have two operators that are exposed, the second wedge in and the fourth wedge in. So let's go ahead one more time and enclose again. This time we're going to enclose the two sets of parentheses. In order to do that, we need to move to a level 2 separator, the square bracket. And so the square bracket goes right before the parenthesis before the P and right after the parenthesis after the S. Now you have one operator that's exposed, the wedge, and that's the main operator. Again, to be sure we're on the same page, these don't have to be done this way. The order will be determined by the sentences. So I have the exact same set of letters and operators written below: P, wedge Q, wedge R, wedge S, wedge T, wedge U. Here we're going to separate out, let's go ahead and make this same main operator, the wedge, that is the fourth one in. We're going to separate out the P wedge Q, but this time we're going to, instead of separating out the R wedge S, we're going to separate out the P wedge Q with the R. Because we've already enclosed the P wedge Q, we have to move to a second layer separator, or a level 2 separator. So we're going to square bracket that. And now let's go ahead and do that square bracket with this letter S. We're going to have to move to a set brace. We're going to do a set brace before the square bracket, which is before the parenthesis, which is before the P. And then we're going to do a set brace after the letter S. But we still have two operators that are exposed. So let's just separate those off. The T, wedge U, we're going to set off with parentheses. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could do this, but once again, based on the sentence, the context of the sentence, it'll tell us how to do it. All right, so those are the separators. Let's move on to the next slide. Now there's a little hint for going through some mechanical translation issues, and it's just nice to have this information in your back pocket. Either A or B, not either A or B, and neither A nor B. Okay. When we see the word either, this won't always help us. It's just something to keep in your back pocket, and at some point it might help you. When you see the word either, that often tells us to start a separator. When you see the A, you're just going to carry it down. The or, you're carrying that down as your wedge, and your B, you carry that down as well. And then you finish your separator. So either A or B is often going to be translated as parenthesis A wedge B close parenthesis. When you see not either A or B, the not is going to be carried down as a negation. Either means start your parenthesis. A carry down, or carry down as your wedge. B carry that down, and then close off your parenthesis. Neither is basically a mashup of not either. So the N for neither is telling you start your negation. And then the either part of that neither is telling you start your separator. And then you carry down your A. Your nor, you're just carrying down as a wedge. And your B, you're carrying down as a B. Now, if the statement just says either A or B and there's nothing else, if you look here, you don't have a main operator because it's enclosed in parentheses. So you'd have to go back to this and erase those parentheses. The reason this helps a lot is sometimes in the middle of a sentence, you'd see something like, if I like pizza, then either I like ice cream or I like, I don't know, garbanzo beans. So if I like pizza, then either I like, I'm going to change it to I like ice cream or I like garbanzo beans. Okay, so you have if I like pizza, then either I like ice cream or I like garbanzo beans. This either I like ice cream or I like garbanzo beans, either tells us set your parenthesis. I like ice cream, we'll go C for ice cream. Then you carry your wedge, or, and then G for garbanzo beans. Then you have your if then statement. If is followed by the antecedent, so you're going to put pizza and your horseshoe. And so there is how you're going to translate that statement. If I like pizza, then either I like ice cream or I like garbanzo beans. Would be P horseshoe parenthesis C wedge G. So that's that either coming in there. So it doesn't always help because sometimes you're going to have an either in the statement, but you won't need your parenthesis. You'd have to remember, oh, I just erased the parenthesis. But a lot of times it will come in to aid us if we need it. The not either and the neither are pretty reliable as the way they're written there, because the not either, your negation is your main operator, and neither, your negation is your main operator. So you can usually just leave it as it's written. If you see the negating word after the either, that tells you that the negation is going to go inside of your parentheses. So whenever you see not, if you see the word either and combined with the word not, if not is before either, that tells you your negation goes before your parenthesis. If not comes after either, that tells you the negation goes somewhere inside of your parenthesis. This holds for both and not both as well. Let's look at those. Both A and B, or not both A and B. Both tells us set your parenthesis, then you carry your A down, carry your and down as a dot, carry your B down. Not both tells us start a negation. Both start your parenthesis, carry your A down, carry your dot down, and carry your B down. Close your parenthesis. Again, sometimes you'll need to go back and erase the parenthesis for both A and B because it won't be needed. This one helps just to keep in your back pocket. Sometimes it'll confuse, but a lot of times it's helpful. The not both is pretty reliable. Again, if you see not after the word both, that's going to tell you to put your negation somewhere after your parenthesis. If you see the word not before the word both, that's going to tell you to put your negation before your parenthesis. So that's either, neither, not either, both, and not both. All right, let's go ahead and practice some translations. So I don't like garbanzo beans. Step one, you simplify out your statements. So we have I don't like garbanzo beans. The statement is really I like garbanzo beans, and then you throw that don't to the beginning. So it would say don't G, or it is not the case that G. So G means I like garbanzo beans. We just moved don't to the front of the sentence. And now we're going to bring it home and plug in the operator, and it's going to be don't G is squiggly line G. So negation G or tilde G, squiggly line G. Technically, this means it is not the case that I like garbanzo beans, but in logic, that means the same thing as I don't like garbanzo beans. Next one, if either we go to the store or we go to the park, then I will be happy. Step one, simplify out your statements. So we have we go to the store, then the next statement is we go to the park, and the next statement is I will be happy. We can shorten that down a bit with if either S or P, then H. Either is inside the antecedent of the if then, so it's next. So it's if either S or P, then H is going to read as if parenthesis S or P, then H. Remember that either, you set your parenthesis. And then finally, we got to deal with that if then. Whatever follows if is your antecedent. So you're going to have S or P is going to be on the left side of the horseshoe. S or P, left side of the horseshoe, H. So it's S or P, horseshoe H. And then the final thing we have to deal with is that or in between S or P. And we're going to turn that into a wedge. S wedge P, horseshoe H. And that's it. Okay, both Desmond and Alice like pizza, or I am a kangaroo. Step one, simplify out your statements. So you have Desmond likes pizza, Alice likes pizza, I am a kangaroo. So it's going to be both D and A or K. Both D and A or K. So D for Desmond likes pizza, A for Alice likes pizza, K for I am a kangaroo. Next step, the word both tells us we're dealing with a separator. The comma also tells us to separate out D and A from the K, so you're relying here on punctuation. So between those three statements, D and A are going to be lumped together, K is going to be off by itself. The comma tells you that. And then also the word both tells us, well, it's a both A and B situation. In this case, A is the letter D, B is the letter A. So now here's what I mean by that. Both, a couple slides ago, I was saying both A and B, and here it's both D and A. So the letter A in this case is really the letter D. The letter B from the previous slide now is going to be that letter A. And so that tells us to go parenthesis D dot A, close parenthesis. Okay, so D and A parenthesis or K. Now we're going to bring it home and plug in the operators. For that D and A, that's a dot, and the or K is a wedge. D dot A wedge K. Okay, so that's it for translation. The big goal for today in the exercises is really just to start working on these translations. They take practice. You'll develop the knack for them, but it does take time. It does take practice. So get working on those, and I'll see you next time. Next time, we're going to build on these translations, and we're going to start working with the sentences. We're going to introduce truth values and evaluating entire statements according to the truth values of their component parts. See you next time. Take care.